Philippines and the book called Customs of the Tagalog by the Juan Plasencia. These old manuscripts from the 16th century tells us about the Tagalog people's customs and traditions before the Spanish came. It takes us back to the times before the Philippines was colonized. This book talks about the social structure of the Tagalog custom or the tribal gatherings called barangays. In those days, a barangay had about 30 to 100 houses where families, relatives, and slaves lived together. Plasencia also talked about the caste systems where people were put into groups based on their families, jobs, and birth. To the top group was the noble, then freemen, and at the bottom were the dependent or slaves. Join us as we explore this interesting piece of history.
Fray Juan y Portocarrero of Convento de Villanueva de la Serena, also known as Fray Juan de Plasencia, was born around 1520s in a family of illustrious Portocarreros in Plasencia, Extremadura, Spain. His father, Don Pedro Portocarrero, was a captain of a Spanish ship. Juan de Plasencia's upbringing was spent against the backdrop of the spiritual and religious resurgence affected by Spain's Siglo de Oro, which was Spain's golden age wherein their politics, military, wealth, and culture flourished. This favorable ambience, which had taken place even in his own region of Extremadura, might have inspired him to show up the Franciscan habit at a very young age. After joining the Franciscan order in Italy, he arrived in the Philippines at a port located in Cavite on July 2, 1578. De Plasencia and Fray Diego de Oropesa began converting people to the Catholic faith just 2 months after they arrived in Manila. They preached across Laguna de Bay region and as far as Tayabas, which is now part of Quezon Province. Prior to departing for the mission in China in June 1579, the Customs Fray Pedro Alvaro temporarily transferred the custodian administration to Fray Juan, a role he maintained until 1580. Also, the neighboring provinces and towns, due to his apostolic zeal and achievements, he was elected as the customs of their chapter on May 23, 1584. He held this office until the election of Fray Pedro Bautista in 1588. Later, in the late 1590s, he passed away in Lillo, Laguna. Fray Juan de Plasencia penned the Relación de las Costumbres de los Tagalos, or the Customs of the Tagalogs, in 1589. To be a more successful missionary, he learned Tagalog. King Philip II of Spain gave him the mission of recording the customs of the indigenous Filipino people, which is why he authored the tale Customs of the Tagalog, where he described social structures, inheritance, and marital customs of the original Filipino people. In addition to his work on Tagalog customs, he is notable for penning the Arte de la Lengua and Declaración de toda la Doctrina Cristiana. It also gave the Philippines a civil code, which the Alcalde Mayor later applied in a show of respect for justice, and which allowed indigenous people to defend themselves in court. Therefore, the primary goal of Fray Juan de Plasencia's authoring of Customs of the Tagalog was to stop the mistreatment of native Filipinos by certain government officials.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to share with you how to analyze Juan de Plasencia's Custom of Tagalog, which is also known as the word of the text. What
On the Plasencia custom Tagalog concedes first, the caste system, second, the slavery system, the third, family status, fourth, justice and dowry system, fifth, we can see, is pre-Hispanic belief, and sixth is date awareness, 7, 12 ministers of Kasanaan, and 8, burial traditions. As we look further, Plasencia's depiction of the caste system in Tagalog also tell us society reveals a stratified social structure where individuals' rights, privilege, and obligation are determined by their social status. At the top are the datus, and followed by how they lead barangays and often very big honors. These can reflecting in their leadership role. Beneath them are the nobles, known as maharlika, who enjoy certain freedom, but also they bear certain responsibility of their respective barangays. They also defending their community. Commoners, also known as aliping namamahay, have more autonomy, while slaves or aliping serve their master with their agency. Slavery can result from war, inheritance, crimes, and also debts. Next, Plasencia also describes complex rules regarding social status inheritance, such as marriage, justice systems that are administered by local leaders. You might be wondering why and when and where are these slaves coming from? So Plasencia mentioned two of the reasons that why this happened. One of it that caused them to become slaves includes the captivity of war. You know, when another barangay successfully invades another barangay, this can cause one of the reasons people become slaves. Second is inheritance. When an aliping bears a child, then child will then inherit certain status or position that the parents have inherited from them, so it leading them to become slaves. Besides, Plasencia mentioned that there are also ways to raise your social standards, such as good deeds, forgiveness, marriage system, and also payments of debts. Let's talk about family status. What does really mean on that in the custom of Tagalog of Plasencia? As Plasencia explained, the pre-Hispanic Philippine era was the time the children inherit whatever social standard their parents came from. If both parents were maharlika, then their children will originally also be maharlika. The same goes to other classes as well. When it comes to justice and dowry system, the datus of the barangay were frequently in charge of investigations and punishments. In terms of debt repayment, in the pre-Hispanic Philippines, a community member would be forced to become a slave if they were unable to pay the debts with gold tael. When we talk about pre-Hispanic beliefs, Spanish missionaries used Christian teaching and medieval historiography to interpret the beliefs and actions of the early Filipinos against the backdrop of the Spanish colonization and also the Christian evangelization. This ultimately characterizing them as demonic and evil. The pre-Hispanic Filipinos worshipped the following Bahala, sun, moon, stars, likha, Diyan Masalanta, Maglakapati, and Idianali, and many more. Next, when we come to date awareness, the pre-Hispanic Filipinos lack a set of method for measuring time intervals when it came to date awareness. Rather, they count the moon cycles, such as they observe how trees develop their leaves, and they know that that is the season for the particular time of harvest and how they cultivate the land. Plasencia also mentioned the 12th minister of Kasanaan in his custom of Tagalog 1589, noted the early Filipinos held the belief that there was an afterlife. They believed in the existence of Kasanaan, ruled by a demon named Satan, and meaning a place of devil. Besides, Maka, which translates to heaven or a hamlet of peace, according to his account. This includes Magagagway, may sala, makukulam, hagloban, silangan, matatagal, uswang, magagayuma, pamagatahog, and bayugin, and surat.
First is the Catalonan, which was either a man or a woman. This office was an honorable one among the natives. Even the dato has high regards on the Castellan, and was held ordinarily by people of rank, this rule being general in all the islands. We all know today that the Catalonan were the Tagalog equivalent of the Visayan babaylan, and functions as a healer, shaman, seer, and a community leader as well. No distinctions as to which exists today. The second part of the 12 kasanaan is what we call the manggagauway, or witches. So this one deceives people by pretending to heal the sick. This priest even induced maladies by their charms, which in proportion to the strength and efficacy of the witchcraft are capable of even causing death. In this way, if they wish to kill at once, they can. Or they can even prolong life for a year by binding their waist to a live serpent, which was believed to be the devil, since, Adam and Eve, serpent is the devil. So, that's the second one. The third one of the kasanaan is what they call the mangisalat. Mangisalat are the same as the manggagaway. They are priests as well, which has the power to apply such remedies, but this only comes towards the lovers, that they would abandon and despise their own wives, and in fact they could even prevent lovers from having intercourse. If the woman, constrained by these means, were abandoned by their partner, it would bring sickness upon her. And on account of the desertion, she would discharge blood and matter. So the third one is scary. For the lovers out there, you better watch out. The fourth one was called mangkokolam, and it might be the mangkokolam that we know nowadays. So the mangkokolam back then, it has a duty to emit fire from himself during the night. Once or each month, this fire can never be extinguished, nor can it be emitted except by the priest wallowed in the ordure and filth which falls from the houses. And he who lived in the house where the priest was wallowing in order to emit this fire from himself fell ill and died. So, the mangkokolam is the fourth one of the 12 kasanaan. The fifth was called hokloban, which is another kind of witch of greater efficacy than the manggagaway. Without the use of medicine, and by simply saluting or raising their hands, they killed whom they chose. But if they decide to heal those whom they had made ill by their charms, they can do this by using other charms as well. Moreover, if they wish to destroy the house of someone hostile to them, they were able to do so without any instruments needed. You know what? This happened in Catanduanes, an island of the upper part of Luzon, where an Indian's house burned out of nowhere. Must be the cause of them. The sixth one was called silagan. And if they saw anyone clothed in white, they would tear out his liver and eat it, causing his death. This was most likely found in the island of Catanduanes. Let no one consider this a fable, because in Kaavan, they tore out in this way through the anus all the intestines of a Spanish notary who was buried in Calilaya by Father Fray Juan de Merida. So I'm not sure about you if you would believe that, but that's what they said. The seventh was called Magtatanggal, and his purpose was to show himself at night to many persons without his head or entrails. In such wise, the devil walked about and carried, or pretended to carry, his head to different places, and in the morning, it returned to its body. Like nothing even happened. Everything is normal. This seems to be a fable for some, although the natives affirm that they have seen it, because the devil probably caused them so to believe. Usually, the magtatanggal is usually found in Catanduanes as well. The eighth one they called as Oswang. I almost said Aswang, but it's Oswang with O. So this one is equivalent to a sorcerer. Some had said that they see them fly, and that they murdered men and ate their flesh. This was among the Visayan island. But among the Tagalogs, they did not know that such Oswang exists. The ninth one was another class of witches called the Mangkagayoma. They made charms for lovers out of herbs, stones, and woods, which would infuse the heart with love. Thus did they deceive the people, although sometimes through the intervention of the devil, they gained their ends. Today, the Gayuma is known as a Filipino love spell to help the love lives of those with lonely or broken hearts. I think these are found during the Valentine's Day as well. The tenth was known as Sonat, which is equivalent to a preacher. It was him to help one to die, at which time he predicted the salvation or condemnation of the soul. It was not lawful for the functions to be fulfilled by other people of high standing, on account of the esteem in which it was held. It can be found anywhere throughout the islands as well. Now, second to the last is the Pangatahoan, which was called as a soothsayer and who predicted the future. You can say that this is a fortune teller in our times. The 12th and the last of the Kasanaan is the Bayukuin, which is signified a quatlain, a man whose nature inclined toward that of a woman. So that is all for our 12 ministers of the Kasanaan. Plasencia's account of Tagalog customs reflects the colonial days, characterized by a Eurocentric perspective that viewed indigenous societies, such as us, the Tagalogs, as primitive or inferior to European civilization or Spanish. Thus, we were made to believe that we Tagalogs were once barbaric and even unknowledgeable at most. We are these barbaric human beings, and if it weren't for the Spaniards, our savior, quote and unquote, we wouldn't be where we are today. Imagine that. We all know that Plasencia's ethnographic documentation of Tagalog customs is framed within the colonial narrative of civilizing and Christianizing the indigenous population, as this was the reason why he had to send this to King Philip II. And although that was somehow a good thing, as we were able to see what the Tagalogs were once back then, they emphasized too much the need to convert to Christianity, to the point that they want to assimilate the indigenous practices and change them into Spanish cultural norms. And all of that just for us to forget who we were once, or what we once were. But come to think of it, why is there a need for such thing? We know that change is constant, but could there be a possibility for just a small thing to stay, despite all of the changes? Just because our beliefs juxtaposed with their Christian values and beliefs, is that why they are portraying Catholicism as a superior and more enlightened worldview? Is it because they are scared of the power that we once hold as Tagalogs and wants to justify the colonial exploitation that they were about to do to our home, the Philippines? Talk about killing two birds with one stone at its finest, but thanks to the Annales School of History perspective on pre-colonial Filipino society, we were able to trace the customs and traditions of the Tagalogs back through centuries of history, through the story of the people. By examining the continuity and evolution of our customs over time and to what we are now having, we gain the idea of who we really are as Filipinos, of who we are back then, and of who we are today. Asking such questions as what are the underlying social, economic, and political structures made back then that influence the Tagalog customs that we have now, and rituals, is something customs of the Tagalog has been able to give us answers about. and we hope it enlightened you as well. The fascinating thing about it is that no matter what stories the Spaniard would come up, the myths that they would tell us back then, somehow the tales that have been told back then is still with us today. Take for example, how the dowry system works. Isn't that what we do in our Nanliligaw stage? Even up until now, some families still follow them. Or maybe the aswangs and the tales told by the old people that still haunts you during the night. Or maybe the mysterious sikihor and how witches and potions are still being sought for by some. We still believe in Bathala as well, even quoting it in some love songs as a trend to emphasize one's love for somebody. Another thing to mention is the deep-rooted faith and spirituality of the Filipino people, a theme that has echoed in the fervent devotion displayed by devotees during the Black Nazarene feast. What a perfect example! The procession of the Black Nazarene statue through the streets of Quiapo symbolizes the unwavering faith of Filipino Catholics and their devotion to Jesus Christ, which started back then, only with the Anitos. So there are no such thing as difference on how we worship the Anitos back then and how we worship our Lord, our Savior right now. But maybe that's just how we keep these stories alive, by telling them and passing them on generations after generations. Oral literature stories will change depending on who's relaying them. And it isn't just done with Philippine mythology as well. There are lots, even in Western mythology and Greek mythology. Come to think of it, the world is becoming more aware, if not more accepting. And another thing, myths and stories are very important in our lives as humans, in a social group where we are a part of a culture. It reflects our current situations and aspirations. These stories are things that we hold on to from the past, so that we can look forward to the future as well. Perhaps all this is a step, rightly or wrongly, toward a certain point of destination. Us Filipinos going back to our roots. In Filipino thought, the concept of the body and soul is deeply rooted in and with our indigenous beliefs, as well as being influenced by centuries of colonialism and the introduction of Christianity. The understanding of the body and the soul lies within each one of us and our perspective of our past, our present, and our future. As one person said, it is one thing to keep a story alive, and it is another thing to protect it. So, to all of you watching us today, we hope that you do not just keep these stories in your minds, but share them with your hearts as well.